Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are here today with what was meant to be Wednesday's video, but we are talking about a holiday known as May Day or International Workers' Day. Um, this is not to be confused with the European May Day celebrating the incoming of spring. This is a May Day about workers. Um, so yeah, it celebrates workers and they're striving to have a better life and everything. So, but let's do some reading here. This is from the Industrial Workers of the World website. Most people living in the U.S. know little about the International Workers' Day of May Day. For many others, there is an assumption that it is a holiday celebrated in state communist countries like Cuba or the former Soviet Union, and most Americans don't realize that May Day has its origins here in this country and is as American as baseball and apple pie, and stemmed from the pre-Christian holiday of Beltane for the celebration of rebirth and fertility. In the late 19th century, late 1800s, working class was in constant struggle to gain an 8-hour workday. Working conditions were severe, and it was quite common to work 10 to 16-hour days in unsafe conditions. Read, we'll have, I'll have to see if I can get a copy of it. Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. And it talks about the horrors of working conditions during this time. Yeah. It's crazy. Death and injury were commonplace to many workplaces and inspired such books as Upton Sinclair's The Jungle and Jack London's The Iron Heel. As early as the 1860s, working people agitated to shorten the workday without a cut in pay, but it wasn't until the late 1880s that organized labor was able to garner enough strength to declare the 8-hour workday. This proclamation was without consent of employers, yet demanded by many of the working class. At this time, socialism was a new and attractive idea to working people, many of who were drawn to its ideology of working class control over the production and distribution of all goods and services. Socialism, communism, the same thing. Kind of, not exactly the same, but the same principal ideas. Workers had seen firsthand that capitalism benefited only their bosses, trading workers' lives for profit. Sounds a bit familiar. Thousands of men, women, and children were dying needlessly every year in the workplace, with life expectancy as low as their early 20s in some industries, and little hope but death of rising out of their destitution. Socialism offered another option. So, yeah, remember, at this time, you work to death if you want to live. You should work to live. You should live to work. That is your only option. It's not about you as an individual, you as a person. You are but a cog in the machine at this point in history. A variety of socialist organizations sprung up throughout the latter half of the 19th century, ranging from political parties to choir groups. In fact, many socialists were elected into governmental office by their constituency. But again, many of these socialists were hamstrung by the political process, which socialists broke ranks from their parties, rebuffed the entire political process, which was seen as nothing more than a protection of the wealthy, and created anarchist groups throughout the country. Yeah, they even went so far left beyond communism, beyond socialism, they became anarchists. So, yeah. In other words, no strong central government to tell them what to do. They worked for themselves. Everything they did was upon them. They could push back against the evils. I think most people nowadays see anarchy as Molotovs and riots and stuff, but that's not fully what it's about. But yeah, and even today, many people will see the political process as protection for the wealthy. Because unfortunately, the two big parties are so bought and paid for by the wealthy. Yeah. It's hard to come up with another explanation of why that is. But yeah, literally thousands of working people embraced the ideals of anarchism, which sought to end the hierarchical structures, including government, emphasized worker-controlled industry, and valued direct action over the bureaucratic political process. It is inaccurate to say that labor unions were taken over by anarchists and socialists, but rather that anarchists and socialists made up the labor unions. At its national convention in Chicago, held in 1884, the Federation of Organized Trades and Labor Unions, which later became the American Federation of Labor, think AFL-CIO, because they combined with the Congress of Industrial Organizations. Anyway, it's the big group, AFL/CIO. Proclaim that 8 hours shall constitute a legal day's labor from and after May the 1st, 1886. The following year, the FOTLU, backed by the Knights of Labor Locals, reiterated the proclamation, stating that it would be supported by strikes and demonstrations. At first, those radicals and anarchists regarded the demand as too reformist, failing to strike at the root of evil. A year before the Haymarket Massacre, remember, last week we talked about the Haymarket Massacre in Chicago. So yeah, May Day, International Workers' Day of May, it was born here in the U.S. That's why we said earlier, it's just as American as baseball and apple pie. The rights of workers. But a year before the Haymarket Massacre, Samuel Fielding pointed out in the anarchist newspaper The Alarm that whether a man works 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day, he is still a slave. So yeah, many anarchists were like, look, the proclamation of just, hey, 8 hours a day, there'll be strikes and demonstrations is too middling. It's too centrist. We need to make it clear the worker controls his own labor, his own production. Despite the misgivings of many of the anarchists, an estimated 250,000 workers in the Chicago area became directly involved in the crusade to implement the 8-hour workday, including the Trades and Labor Assembly, the Socialist Labor Party, and the local Knights of Labor. As more and more of the workforce mobilized against the employers, these radicals conceded to fight for the 8-hour day, realizing that the tide of opinion and determination of most wage workers was set in this direction. With the involvement of the anarchists, there seemed to be an infusion of greater issues than the 8-hour day. There grew sense of a greater social revolution beyond the more immediate gains of shortened hours, but a drastic change in the economic structure of capitalism. Yeah, as big as gaining the 8-hour day was, they was like, there's more that is needed, because we're still essentially wage slaves to capitalist slave masters. In a proclamation printed just before May the 1st, 1886, one publisher appealed to working people with this idea: working men to arms, war to the palace, peace to the cottage, and death to luxurious idleness. The wage system is the only cause of the world's misery. It is supported by the rich classes, and to destroy it, they must be either made to work or die. 1 pound of dynamite is better than a bushel of balloons. Make your demand for 8 hours with weapons in your hands to meet the capitalistic bloodhounds, police, and militia in proper manner. So yeah, workers weren't messing around. They were like, look, we will literally fight for our rights, for the respect we deserve as workers. Not surprisingly, the entire city was prepared for mass bloodshed, reminiscent of the railroad strike a decade earlier when police and soldiers gunned down hundreds of striking workers. May 1st, 1886, more than 300,000 workers in 13,000 businesses across the U.S. walked off their jobs in the first May Day celebration in history. In Chicago, the epicenter for the 8-hour day agitators, 40,000 went out on strike with the anarchists in the forefront of the public's eye. With their fiery speeches and revolutionary ideology of direct action, anarchist and anarchism became respected and embraced by the working people and despised by the capitalists. The names of many, and these are names we know if you remember the video we did on the Haymarket Massacre, the names of many: Albert Parsons, Johann Most, August Spiez, and Louis Ling became household words in Chicago and throughout the country. Parades, bands, and tens of thousands of demonstrators in the streets exemplified the workers' strength and unity, yet didn't become violent as the newspapers and authorities predicted. More and more workers continued to walk off their jobs until the numbers swelled to nearly 100,000. Yet peace prevailed. It was not until 2 days later, May the 3rd, 1886, that violence at the McCormick Reaper Works between police and strikers. For 6 months, armed Pinkerton agents and police harassed and beat, locked out steelworkers as they picketed. Most of these workers belonged to the anarchist-dominated Metal Workers Union. During a speech near the McCormick plant, some 200 demonstrators joined the steelworkers on the picket line. Beatings with police clubs escalated into rock throwing by the strikers, which the police responded to with gunfire. At least 2 strikers were killed and an unknown number were wounded. Full of rage, the public meeting was called by some of the anarchists for the following day in Haymarket Square to discuss the police brutality. Due to bad weather and short notice, only about 3,000 of the tens of thousands of people showed up from the day before. This affair included families with children and the mayor of Chicago himself. Later, the mayor would testify that the crowd remained calm and orderly and that Speaker August Spiez made no suggestion for immediate use of force or violence toward any person. As the speech wound down, 2 detectives pushed to the main body of police, reporting that the speaker was using inflammatory language, inciting the police to march on the speaker's wagon. Again, sounds familiar as far as tactics like that. Isn't that interesting? As the police began to disperse the already thinning crowd, a bomb was thrown into the police ranks. No one knows who threw the bomb, but speculations varied from blaming any one of the anarchists to an agent provocateur working for the police. Enraged, the police fired into the crowd. The exact number of civilians killed or wounded was never determined, but an estimated 7 or 8 civilians died, and up to 40 were wounded. 1 officer died immediately, and another 7 died in the following weeks. Later evidence indicated that only one of the police deaths could have been attributed to the bomb, and all the other police fatalities had or could have been due to their own indiscriminate gunfire. Aside from the bomb thrower, who was never identified, it was the police, not the anarchist, who perpetrated the violence. 8 anarchists, Albert Parsons, August Spiez, Samuel Fielden, Oscar Neebe, Michael Schwab, George Engel, Adolf Fischer, and Louis Ling, were arrested and convicted of murder, though only 3 were even present at the actual Haymarket during the event, and those 3 were in full view of all when the bombing occurred. The jury in their trial was comprised of business leaders in a gross mockery of justice similar to the Sacco Vanzetti case 30 years later, or the trials of AIM and Black Panther members in the 70s. The entire world watched as these 8 organizers were convicted, not for their actions, of which all were innocent, but for their political and social beliefs. On November the 11th, 1887, after many failed appeals, Parsons, Spies, Engel, and Fisher were hung to death. Louis Ling, in his final protest of the state's claim of authority and punishment, took his own life the night before with an explosive device in his mouth. The remaining organizers, Fielding, Neebe, and Schwab, were pardoned 6 years later by Governor Altgeld, who publicly lambasted the judge on the travesty of justice. Immediately after the Haymarket Massacre, big business and government conducted what some say was the very first Red Scare in this country. And of course, we've had a number of Red Scares, proclaiming, oh, look at the infiltration of communists and socialists. They're bringing down society. Perhaps the most famous Red Scare was during the 1950s when McCarthy, a U.S. congressman, held trials, putting people on trial, proclaiming they're communist. They're communist sympathizers. Of course, while we were in the middle of the Cold War with communist USSR. So yeah, it's this kind of BS. But, let's see. Spun by mainstream media, anarchism became synonymous with bomb throwing and socialism became un-American. So again, they use this moment to proclaim anarchism's where they throw Molotovs and explosives and hurt people. There's no evidence of any of it. All it is saying, look, the government is unneeded. The workers should control everything because they are the people. They are the country itself. The common image of an anarchist became a bearded Eastern European immigrant with a bomb in one hand and a dagger in the other. Today, we see tens of thousands of activists embracing the ideas of the Haymarket Martyrs and those who established May Day as International Workers' Day. Ironically, May Day is an official holiday in 66 countries and unofficially celebrated by many more. But rarely is it recognized in this country where it actually began. So yeah, 66 countries celebrate this holiday, International Workers' Day, May Day, yeah. But what else can we look at here? May Day commemorates the historic struggles and gains made by workers in the labor movement observed in many countries on May 1st. In the US and Canada, a similar observance known as Labor Day occurs on the first Monday of September, trying to separate workers' rights from the event, the Haymarket Massacre, that brought into existence a very similar holiday, May Day, the International Day of Workers. But yeah. U.S. President Grover Cleveland, uneasy with the socialist origins of Workers' Day, signed legislation to make Labor Day, already held in some states, on the first Monday of September, an official U.S. holiday in honor of workers. So yeah. they're so scared of the power of the people, the average worker, the average person. Oh yeah, I just wanted to give y'all a peek at May Day. And again, it's very much tied to the Haymarket Massacre, which we talked about in a video last week. So, this is a very important day because it's meant to celebrate workers. When this video is coming out, actual May Day would have been yesterday. But point is, it celebrates workers. But capitalists and people in power were so scared of the origins of May Day, they like, oh, Labor Day here in September instead. That's going to be what the U.S. celebrates. Well, you know what? Let's celebrate them both, Labor Day and May Day. Because, yeah, it should always be workers first. Woo! Burning up. Sweating like crazy. Like a pig in a slaughterhouse. But we'll go ahead and end this episode there. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll be putting my links and sources in the description box below the video. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.